I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Congratulations, Dr. Coffey.
School attendance, duties of local authorities and proprietors of schools bill, second reading.
Now.
I call
Vicky Paul.
Thank you. I beg to move the bill be now read a second time. I want to start by saying that I believe we should all be extraordinarily proud of our nation's young people. Children in England now rank 11th in the world for maths and 13th for reading. Back in 2010, when today's school leavers were just starting out in reception, the same league tables placed the equivalent cohort of children 27th for maths and 25th for reading. I'm also very proud that every single one of the schools in my Chelmsford constituency is ranked good or outstanding. That's up from just 2 in 3 schools 14 years ago. There's been phenomenal progress and we must not let it slip. This is why it is so concerning that the number of severely absent or persistently absent pupils is still dramatically higher than it was pre the pandemic. Whilst the numbers have improved over the past year, we still have over 1 million children or young children persistently absent or worse. As well as being a place to socialise and make friends, school is key to giving young people access to skills and opportunities in their future. The surge in persistent and severe absences risks a profound impact on educational attainment and then on longer-term outcomes. Research by the Children's Commissioner found that 3/4 of children who were rarely absent from school received 5 good grades at GCSE, including the crucial English and maths. But when we look at those who were persistently absent, missing 10% or more of their school time, only 1 in 3 met that standard. And indeed, for children who were severely absent, it's only 1 in 20. A school, Matt, that has a school in my constituency pointed that even a small drop in attendance can have a profound impact. They looked at the relationships between attendance and GCSE results in one of the high-performing schools. 82% of those who had achieved 95 to 100% attendance got those 5 good GCSEs, including English and maths. But when you look at the children who were there between 90 and 95% of the time, it was only 68%. So even those few missed sessions can make a huge difference. I will indeed.
I'm most grateful. I think that's the most fascinating insight for the House, the impact of non-attendance only for a relatively short part of the school year can have such an impact on performance. Is this widely recognised within the school to teacher community, particularly amongst head teachers, or is this something which she's seeking to draw to their attention through this excellent bill?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for that excellent intervention. I think that the Children's Commissioner research has really accurately pinpointed how these small differences in attendance can have this big difference on outcomes. That research has been done more recently since the pandemic, but it is something that the school teachers that I met recently were very concerned about. And clearly then when you move into severe absences, it's a very big point. I would like to point out that the reasons for the increased levels of pupil absence are multiple and complex. Issues include support for those with special educational needs and disabilities, anxiety and mental health. We know, for example, that if a child's SEND needs are unmet, that can lead to them missing out on education. Changes in attitudes towards minor ailments may be another driving force, as parents are now more likely to keep their children at home for minor illnesses such as coughs and colds than they were before the pandemic. But in most cases, children are better off at school, including when they have minor ailments like these. There are also serious concerns that for the most vulnerable pupil, regular attendance is a very important protective factor. I was concerned to hear from an expert in alternative provision that attendance in alternative provisions that he covers has dropped below 60% for the first time. But research shows that regular absence from school can expose young people to other harms, such as being drawn into crime or serious violence. I'm really grateful to the Children's Commissioner for bringing together a round table of experts in this area to discuss the issue in more depth earlier this week. The group included heads of multi-academy trusts from across the country, representatives of local authorities, mental health experts, attendance experts, AP providers and others. Every single attendee stated their support for the bill that is before us today. They also spoke about some of the drivers that they've seen behind the increase in non-attendance. We heard that the economic situation, such as pressures on household budgets, pressures on housing, which means that people sometimes get rehoused further away from schools, have had an impact for some families. But these are not the cause of poor attendance in the majority of cases. Some commentators have also noted that absence is higher amongst children on free school meals. But one, Matt, who's done a lot of research at school level, suggested this may not be the case for all different ethnic groups. His research compared cohorts of schools where all the schools had high levels of free school meals. The school that also had a high proportion of pupils where English is a second language had a much better level of attendance than the school cohort that had a very high proportion of white British. And I do think that that needs some further investigation. The head of a multi-academy trust at the schools in my area, as well as in other areas, explained that there had been a particular uptick in poor attendance by girls in years 8, 9 and 10. And other school leaders confirmed that they had also seen a similar trend. They suggested that this may be linked to lower mental well-being and self-esteem. It's worth reading the 2023 Girls' Attitude Survey by Girl Guiding UK, as that would bear this out. The excellent reports shows that girls' happiness are at the lowest levels since they started this survey 15 years ago. The survey reported increased online bullying, online sexism, and online harms amongst girls, as well as a large increase in the number of girls feeling ashamed of how they look. This shows why the work the government has done to tackle online harms is so vital, and also shows why it's vital that Ofcom really do implement what's been set out in the online safety bill. And of course, there is more work to be done to address this. A number of experts reflected that they felt that the contract between schools and families had been broken by the pandemic. The report by the Centre for Social Justice goes into this in some detail. I was interested that a local authority representative suggested that the breaking of this contract may have been further compounded by days off due to teacher strikes. Some leaders also suggested that there may be a link for some families between the increase in hybrid working and children missing school. Now, as a mum, I can completely see that it may be more difficult for some parents to persuade a reluctant child to go out of the house and into the school on days when one is working at home oneself. Some other countries have interestingly looked at some hybrid modelling for schools post-pandemic. What we do need to always remember that for the vast majority of children, they are better off in school. We discussed the issues of fines, and I was told that in some cases, parents themselves asked for an education attendance order to be placed on them, as they believe it could help them to persuade a reluctant child to attend school. But in addressing the issue of school attendance, it's important that we do not simply lay the blame at the door of hard-working parents. Most parents want their children to do well, but many do not have the help or support that they need in order that they can support their children to fulfil those aspirations. And that is why securing good attendance requires a holistic approach, an approach that brings together schools, families, the local authority, and other local partners. This is also why, in 2022, following an in-depth consultation, the Department for Education published new guidance entitled Working Together to Improve School Attendance, and I have a copy here, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You can see it's very lengthy. It runs to over 60 pages. It's extremely detailed. A great deal of emphasis is placed on early help and multidisciplinary support. It requires every school to have a senior member of the school's leadership team acting as attendance champion. It sets out how schools and other partners should work together. Last year, the Education Select Committee undertook a detailed inquiry on attendance, and witnesses agreed that this guidance needs to be put on a statutory footing. That was a major recommendation of the committee. Making it mandatory for bodies to follow that best practice guidance is supported by the Children's Commissioner and the Centre for Social Justice, as well as the Select Committee and many other experts. And the bill that we have before us today will make that happen. It won't solve all the issues, but it will make the guidance statutory. The bill will ensure all schools, trusts, local authorities and other relevant local partners need to follow the best practice guidance. It will introduce a new general duty on local authorities to exercise their functions with a view to promoting regular attendance and reducing absence in their areas. The second clause will require schools of all types to have and publicise a school attendance policy. Both these clauses will require all schools and local authorities to have regard to the guidance issued by the Secretary of State, and this is to be achieved by inserting two clauses into the Education Act of 1996 under Section 443. The Department for Education has told me that they will publish a revised version of the guidance ahead of the provisions taking effect, and the guidance will help to reduce unfairness in the amount of support available for families in different areas of the country, and thus level up standards in areas with poorer attendance by providing consistent access to support. Local authorities will need to provide all schools with a named point of contact for queries and advice. They'll need to meet each school termly, use their services and levers to remove common causes of absence in their areas, and work with agencies to provide that support where it's needed in cases of persistent or severe absence. Schools will be expected to have the attendance champion, to have robust day-to-day processes for recording, monitoring and following up on absences, use their attendance data to prioritise the pupils and cohorts on which to focus their efforts, and to work jointly with local authorities and other agencies where the causes of persistent and severe absence go beyond the school's remit. A register of children who are out of school due to elective home education is not part of my bill, but it is part of a bill tabled before Christmas by my honourable friend, the member of Meon Valley. It's a separate issue and another bill is coming on that matter. Finally, I'd like to thank so many third parties, including the Centre for Social Justice, for their research on the subject, Children's Commissioner and her team for their recent advice. I'm extremely grateful to all of those who are experts in education and who care so deeply for children for their support for this bill. And just to conclude, school attendance is key to our children's future. This bill will make the guidance mandatory, so every school, local authority and body will need to follow the best practice. It is a positive legal step that we here can take to enable children to get the support they need and help them return to school. I hope all members will support it, and I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Mr Dunne.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise to support this bill, and in particular to reference the continuing impact of the COVID pandemic on pupils who remain at school. In talking to head teachers in the terms following closure of schools through the pandemic, it was brought to my attention that the absence from school compulsory as a result of the pandemic has led to some very worrying behaviours. A number of children have not returned to school as a direct consequence. And while they may be educated at home, the lack of ability to socialise amongst children, in particular when transitioning from primary school to secondary school, which sets the tone for their behaviour with for older cohorts, is something that is breaking down, and that persists then for those children as they become teenagers and move into adult life. If they've not had the ability to learn how to deal with people of different age groups, it not just has an impact on their education, but it has a profound impact on their ability to socialise in later life. So I think this is a particularly timely bill to encourage attendance now, because we've gone through this period where there are still many children in secondary school, and most have come through primary by now, but into secondary school, who've been so badly affected through the pandemic. My honourable friend mentioned organisations that have been helpful to her. I'd just like to make another point in relation to mental health issues. I believe the Centre for Mental Health and the Children and Young People's Mental Health Coalition were helpful in pointing out to her in preparation for this bill that absence from school is also impacting on their mental health, and they had recommended that mental health an absence code for mental health should be introduced. We can clearly welcome the introduction of the progress being made in mental health support teams being rolled out to many thousands of schools, and perhaps the Minister might be able to touch on that in his remarks. I think the final point I would make is that the requirement in Clause 2 for schools to publish their attendance performance policy, the policy will help significantly in improving performance, because it will give head teachers and class teachers the ability to point out to parents that the policy is in place before students arrive at their school when they're selecting their secondary school, and to use it as a mechanism to explain to the parents of recalcitrant children that this is an absolute requirement of the school, and by being required to publish the policy and perhaps in due course publish the actual attendance figures, it will give them a tool that they currently lack. So I support this bill.
Thank you very much. Joe Gideon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. First of all, may I congratulate my right honourable friend, the member for Chelmsford, for bringing forward this really important bill. Being around teachers and friends in a school or college environment is the best way for pupils to learn and reach their potential. Time in school also keeps children safe and provides access to extracurricular activities and pastoral care. The data that we have about school attendance divides into children who are persistently absent. They miss 10% or more of possible sessions. That's equivalent to about one afternoon every week. And in spring 2023, that was equivalent to 21% of all children. I mean, that is an astonishing 1.5 million students. Children who were severely absent miss over 50% of lessons. That means that they're absent more often than they're present. And in spring 2023, at least 140,000 children were severely absent. Compared to school records pre-pandemic, the number of children who are severely absent has increased by 133%. Something has to happen, and I think we have to have a child-centric approach where the child's voice is heard, and that will help improve attendance. I'm glad to hear that the attendance mentor scheme has been expanded to include Stoke-on-Trent, providing one-to-one mentoring support to pupils over a 3-year period. Schemes like this, tackling the factors behind non-attendance, such as bullying or mental health issues, or that feeling of just being too far behind, and the actual tutoring aspect of it too, make a significant difference. But even this is still only reaching 1% of severely absent pupils at most. This does not represent a serious response to this unfolding crisis in our education system. We must act now to return these children to the classroom. Every day that we wait is a day that pushes them farther away from the education they deserve. In Stoke-on-Trent, we have the highest number of looked-after children of any local authority. Children who may have lacked a family support network, as well as those having to deal with difficult circumstances at home, caring responsibilities for a parent or sibling. These are all children who need to be in full-time education and be provided extra support. I'd just like to highlight some of the excellent work that is happening in Stoke and how we actually support children who are maybe from those challenging backgrounds. So Stoke-on-Trent Sixth Form College have an area where they provide warm clothes and coats for children because no child should ever be too cold to be able to learn. I chair the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Youth Affairs and have heard from young people directly why they sometimes feel that school isn't relevant. Talking about the curriculum, they say that it doesn't meet their needs. It doesn't include important subjects like financial and enterprise education or practical skills such as preparing food and preparing them for the jobs of the future. Every day of education matters, and failure to keep children in a classroom is storing up untold problems for the future. So I absolutely endorse every effort of this bill to strengthen local authorities' powers, encouraging them to work with schools and instill a sense of desire and bringing every child that we can back into school.
Much, Rob Butler.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and let me start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Chelmsford, on the introduction of her bill. Good levels of attendance for children at school are crucial to their education. It should really go without saying that missing classes can cause serious consequences in later life, and so evidently it's imperative that we do all we can to get children who are regularly absent back in school. And as my honourable friend mentioned, the bill is a simple but crucial piece of legislation that will help to combat the real concern of children being away by placing a general duty to promote regular attendance at school, and should therefore help ensure that schools play their part as well by requiring them to have a dedicated attendance policy. I'm very pleased that the government is already committed to confronting absence, with the Education Secretary commenting that tackling attendance is her #1 priority, and that in 2022 the department published detailed guidance for schools, academies, independent schools and local authorities to help to improve school attendance. This bill aims to make some of those recommendations statutory, and while the move to that statutory footing is generally welcome, I do know that some local authorities are a little bit concerned about the cost implications for them, moving from an advisory to a statutory footing. Anything the Minister could say in his remarks about support for those local authorities would, I'm sure, be very welcome. Because it should be recognised, I think, that ensuring attendance is a team effort. I was very pleased that in 2022 the Department for Education launched a consultation seeking the views on measures to improve the consistency of support to families in England on school attendance that had respondents from that very wide team joint effort: school staff, academy trusts, parents, local authorities and other relevant organisations. And the results from that were largely in favour of implementing the changes that this bill aims to bring in. 71% of those asked agreed with the proposal to require schools to have an attendance policy. I also welcome the government's recent announcement that over the next 3 years up to £15 million will be invested to expand the Attendance Mentor pilot programme, which provides direct intensive to support to more than 10,000 persistent and severely absent pupils, alongside the announcement that there'll be 18 new attendance hubs, seeing nearly 2,000 schools benefit from advice on cutting down absences. That is almost a list, but it's a list of good things the department is doing to tackle this problem, to which this proposed new legislation only adds. While this additional funding and the expansion of the hubs is welcome, the support that is available to families and pupils can currently vary significantly depending on the school the child attends and which local authority area they live in. So I am pleased that this bill intends to end this variability. Requiring local authorities to provide all schools with a named point of contact to support with queries and advice will give schools reassurance that they're not on their own. And by mandating local authorities to use their services to remove common causes of absence in their area will, I hope, help combat any socio-economic factors that may be leading to lower attendance. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, like most honourable and right honourable members, including, if I dare to say, yourself, Mr Deputy Speaker, I frequently visit schools in my own constituency, and I am consistently impressed by the dedication and the commitment of the teachers and all of the other staff in those schools. I'm especially proud to have a UTC in my constituency, which provides education that goes well beyond traditional academic subjects and indeed focuses on developing skills that will be directly relevant in the workplace. It underlines the range of superb educational provision that exists in Aylesbury. I would like to highlight today the brilliant Ofsted report that was received by Aylesbury High School this week, which was judged to be outstanding in each and every category. That is a tremendous achievement, and I hope that the Minister, indeed the entire House, will join me in congratulating the head teacher and everybody at Aylesbury High School for that achievement. Sadly, though, more generally, too often during my visits to schools, I do hear about the challenges of ensuring attendance. And, of course, the individual school needs to implement policies to tackle that attendance challenge, whether it's a high school, a UTC, a primary school, or whatever type of educational setting. So I am pleased that part of this bill will require all schools to implement robust day-to-day processes for recording, monitoring and following up absences. These data will help the school and the local authority to assess the best ways to tackle short and long-term absences. It is, though, important that we do not overburden our schools, and I think this is particularly the case for some of the smaller schools, which tend to be those for children of a younger age. And I saw this firsthand during a visit to a primary school in my constituency towards the end of last year. Because despite having absolutely excellent facilities, superb teaching staff and happy children, there was one challenge that really was prominent in their minds, and that was attendance. And despite the school's very considerable efforts at engagement with parents, there were some who just simply refused to bring their children to school. Such was the desperation of staff that sometimes they felt they had no choice but to drive in their own cars at their own expense and pick up pupils themselves. Now, this cannot be right, but they did it because they were nervous, even scared of the implications if they didn't, if they could be construed not to have done absolutely everything possible to ensure attendance. They were particularly concerned that it might result in being downgraded by Ofsted. I don't think that is what the government or anybody else intends when it says it wants to secure really good attendance. So I think we must make sure that this legislation does not increase the likelihood of that added burden, added pressure on school staff who already have plenty to keep them occupied that is rather more legitimate in achieving the best possible education for children in them. Overall, though, I think that this bill has the potential to go a very long way in tackling pupils' absence from school. It will further assist the government's long-term commitment to improving education, help ensure children are getting the most that they possibly can out of school. So let me repeat my congratulations to my honourable friend, the member for Chelmsford, on getting her bill to this stage. I look forward to seeing it get to the next stage, both in this place and in the other place.
Thank you. Shadow Minister, Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And firstly, I would like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Chelmsford on bringing this private member's bill forward for second reading today. And I agree with her that poor attendance rates that we're seeing in our schools are a crisis that must be addressed urgently. That's why Labour proposed an Opposition Day motion last week with a range of solutions to address this problem. Unfortunately, it was voted down by government members, and it was a long-term plan to deal with the school attendance crisis. Labour will support this bill today, but unfortunately, as the Honourable Lady herself acknowledged, it is a limited first step in dealing with this problem. Schools providing their attendance policies to parents will do little to encourage the 1 in 4 parents who the Centre for Social Justice found don't view school as essential every day. Placing duties on local authorities to promote attendance will only shift the blame away from the government, who have watched this situation spiral out of control, to councils who have already been doing their best to deal with this. And while any measures intending to deal with this problem are clearly welcome, this bill will only scratch the surface. We need proper interventions to get children back in the classroom, because the figures are stark. Under this government, last year, 21.2% of children were persistently absent from school. That's over 1 in 5, and it's double what it was just 6 years ago. And the number of children missing half of their lessons has rocketed too. In my local authority of Newcastle, the number rose by 282% in just 6 years, and other areas have even higher numbers. How can we properly set up a child for the future if they are missing every other lesson in school? And all this is going on whilst the Secretary of State says that this is her #1 priority. In the Labour Party, we firmly believe that every child matters, and to those children, every day at school matters. And so that's why we have set out a long-term plan which looks at the issues causing persistent absence in the round. We see the evidence that breakfast clubs have a positive impact on attendance, as well as children's learning and development, and that's why we're pledging to roll out free breakfast clubs to every primary school in England, funded by ending the non-dom tax breaks for the mega-rich. We see the mental health crisis unfolding in our young people, as the Honourable Lady mentioned, with children languishing on long CAMHS waiting lists. So we would recruit thousands of new staff to bring those lists down and put specialist mental health professionals in schools so children can access the support they need. We also see that there needs to be more accountability in the system, so problems like this are picked up earlier on. So Labour's plan would involve annual school checks covering persistent absence, as well as off-rolling and child safeguarding. We can see that children are not engaging with a curriculum and assessment system, which has been described to me as joyless and narrow. So we would launch an expert-led curriculum and assessment review, looking at how to broaden our curriculum to prepare children for the future and give them an excellent foundation in reading, writing and maths, but without sacrificing the things that make school fun. We also see that children's early speech and language development has suffered over the last few years, and getting it right early on will lead to better engagement throughout their school life. So we would equip primary schools with funding to deliver evidence-based early language interventions. And finally, we would introduce a Children Not in School register to ensure that children not being taught in a school environment don't fall through the gaps. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I must ask the government front bench, is this really the best the government can do to tackle the attendance crisis? We face a lost generation missing from Britain's schools, and yet we've heard so little of substance from the government on how to resolve this. So we will support this bill through its second reading today. If nothing else, it shines yet another spotlight on the lack of action from the government in dealing with this crisis in our schools. We really must see more urgency from ministers on how they intend to tackle this problem. Tinkering around the edges will not do. We need a proper long-term plan, and if the government won't deliver it, despite the Honourable Lady's best efforts, the next Labour government will.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And first, may I congratulate warmly my right honourable friend, the member for Chelmsford, on her success in the ballots and in using that success for this purpose. I am absolutely delighted that she has chosen school attendance as the subject for her bill. It is a subject which I know is close to her heart and one she has championed with aplomb and with impact. She said in her remarks towards the end that attendance is the key to children's future, and I would agree with that. We've often said that reading is the most fundamental thing in school, because if you can't read properly, you can't access the curriculum, nothing else works. Well, attendance is even more important than that, because whatever else our brilliant teachers are doing in schools, if the children aren't there, they can't benefit from it. And I thank colleagues on this side of the House and the Honourable Lady who speaks for the opposition for their contributions to this debate. And I know that across the House we all recognise the importance of regular attendance, not only for children's attainment, but for their well-being and their development. There is some evidence, Mr Deputy Speaker, that since the pandemic, some attitudes to absence have changed, with a somewhat greater propensity in some homes to keep a child at home with minor illnesses, with a cough or a cold, that prior to the pandemic they would have gone into school. It is worth saying that before COVID, of course, great progress had been made since 2010 on attendance, and we are committed to getting back to attendance levels. They'll never be 100%, of course, for obvious reasons. Every child needs to be off school ill at some point, and sadly some children, of course, have to be off for quite extended periods, but we do need to get back to that pre-pandemic level that we had got to of 95% or above. I'm pleased to confirm, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the Government fully supports my right honourable friend's bill and the measures contained in it. We're exploring all possible avenues to make our attendance guidance statutory, including the use of existing powers. This is important because we want every child to be able to achieve their potential, and attending school regularly obviously is crucial to that. As my right honourable friend outlined, this bill will improve the consistency of support available in all parts of England by firstly requiring schools of all types to have and publicise a school attendance policy, and second, by introducing a new general duty on local authorities to seek to improve attendance and reduce absence in their areas. As part of this, the bill will require schools and local authorities to have regard to statutory guidance. In practice, that will see us revising and reissuing our Working Together to Improve School Attendance guidance. That guidance is widely supported by schools, by trusts and by local authorities, and both the Select Committee and the Children's Commissioner have already called for it to be made statutory. The guidance was introduced in September 2022 and has already started to make a difference. There were 380,000 fewer pupils persistently absent or not attending in 2022-23 than in 21-22. Overall absence for the autumn term just gone was 6.8%, down from 7.5% in autumn 2022, or to turn it the other way around, attendance is up year on year in that term from 92.5% to 93.2%. However, while we of course welcome that improvement, there is still further to go to get to those pre-pandemic levels and better. And there are still parts of the country where families don't have access to the right support, as my honourable friend from Aylesbury rightly identified. And it's important to legislate to truly end that postcode lottery so any family can get the support that they need. And doing that will give parents increased clarity and level up standards across schools and local authorities. It's also an important part of this government's emphasis on a support-first approach, meaning that schools and local authorities work together to break down the barriers that can stop a pupil from attending. So to support schools and local authorities to meet those expectations, the government already has a comprehensive attendance strategy, and this aspect of it is only one part of a much wider whole. We have deployed attendance advisors to support local authorities and a number of trusts. We've created a new data tool with 88% now of state-funded schools signed up to it. We've convened at the system leadership level the Attendance Action Alliance to work across sectors to remove barriers to attendance and reduce absence. We've launched 32 attendance hubs to reach over 1 million pupils, and we've expanded our attendance mentor pilot, as my honourable friend from Stoke Central rightly mentioned, to reach 15 priority education investment areas. And of course there is much wider work in place as well. There are more children now who are eligible for free school meals as a result of the protections put in place on universal credit transition. £30 million being spent on breakfast clubs and targeted to where it is most needed, where it can have the most effect, and that does include, I say to the Honourable Lady opposite, that does include secondary schools as well as primary schools. There's the holiday activities and food programme. On the pupil premium, we're increasing that in 24-25 to £2.9 billion. And of course, attendance is itself one of the great factors, one of the really important drivers in narrowing the gap between better off and more disadvantaged pupils. Through the Supporting Families programme, we're now expanding that programme over this spending review period, and attendance at school, where there is an attendance problem, is a absolutely fundamental part of that programme. My right honourable friend from Ludlow mentioned the lasting effect, sadly, of the pandemic, the importance of socialisation. He's absolutely right. We think quite often of the early years and the effect on the youngest children, but actually it's true throughout a child or young person's development. He mentioned particularly the year 6 to year 7 transition point, which we know is pivotal in so many ways, and a lot of schools doing some very good work there. He asked specifically about mental health and about the possibility of an absence code, and I do understand his motivation and others in raising this point. I would just say there is a practicality question about, at the moment that you are taking the register, being able to say that something is one particular type of health issue or another is not always practical, and there is the risk that you would have inaccurate reporting and misunderstanding of trends as a result. But he also mentioned the wider work on mental health, and he will know that we're putting forward a grant for every state school to be able to train a senior mental health lead, and then of course the really important wider work on mental health support teams, supporting clusters of schools, primary as well as secondary, which continues to grow. My honourable friend from Stoke Central, as well as the Mentors programme, also mentioned the importance of extracurricular activity and pastoral care. And I think that's a really important thing. We need to always be saying this. It's not only about the learning and the attainment, it's about everything else that comes with school. I join my honourable friend, of course, from Aylesbury in congratulating Aylesbury High School. And he was right also to ask about cost for local authorities and not overburdening schools. And in advance of issuing our existing guidance on attendance, we did have a comprehensive new burdens assessment, which found that the expectations could be implemented by local authorities without additional funding if they had the average number of staff working on attendance. And we're confident that this assessment remains accurate based on a growing body of evidence since that assessment was published. The evidence shows that where local authorities are delivering the guidance, staffing levels have remained within those predicted levels. But he's also right to talk about making sure that we do not overburden schools themselves. And I join him in paying tribute to school leaders, school teachers, and wider staff actually for the extraordinary work that we have heard going on. And what they are doing to get children into school. And I absolutely agree with him that we need to make sure we've got a proportionate approach, and one that supports the whole system, supports the schools, supports the local authorities, works with people in our common endeavour to maximise the benefit that children get from their education. Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill is passed, as I've said, will also update our existing guidance in advance of the new school year to reflect the latest best practice and feedback we've gathered from the sector, and to make it as easy as possible for schools and local authorities to understand the actions they need to take. In closing, I reiterate my thanks and appreciation to my right honourable friend, the member for Chelmsford, for bringing this important bill before the House today. Being in school has never been more valuable, with standards continuing to rise, and this bill will help make sure that every young person and their family, whatever their background and wherever they are in the country, can receive the support they need to do just that. And I'm sure we'll hear more and look forward to hearing more from my right honourable friend as this bill progresses through the House. I thank her again, and I urge colleagues, members and honourable members across the House to support the bill.
With leave of the House speaking forward.
With the leave of the House, thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I start by saying a big thank you to everybody who's spoken in the debate today, especially those who've spoken from the backbenchers, the member for Ludlow, Aylesbury and Stoke-on-Trent Central. I know they all care passionately for the children and young people and those who are educating them in their own constituencies. They brought a number of very important points. Particularly, I'd like to address the issue of the mental health support teams and the various mental health charities that wrote to me, the Centre for Mental Health and Centre for Children and Young People's Mental Health Coalition. They do some excellent work. They did recommend that a mental health absent code is introduced, and I listened closely to the Minister on this issue. It's maybe not as simple as one would like. They had, in their letter to me, welcomed the laudable progress, that's their word, laudable progress, that's been made in rolling out mental health support teams to many thousands of schools. I know we'd like to see more. They do a super job, but it is amazing the initiative and the difference that has made. There is an important point about not putting extra burdens on schools and local authorities, and thank you also to the Minister for this. I'd like to say again thank you to all the staff from the Department for Education and others who've helped with this bill. I'd like to also thank His Majesty's opposition for saying that they will support this bill. I would like to say to His Majesty's opposition that we must not talk down our children. Our children are doing exceptional things and have had very difficult times. Our children are the best readers in the Western world. They have leapfrogged past so many other countries in what they achieve in reading and writing. It's been exceptional what has been achieved in the 14 years that has been a child's journey from reception to year 13. And we must be so proud of them. It is this government that put in those early reading improvements through phonics, that gave them those bases and has introduced those early years, extra hours, and is now rolling that out even further. I would also like to say that if His Majesty's opposition truly cared about attendance in school, they would have made this bill, making the best practice guidance, the bill that they supported in their opposition day, which they didn't, because this was the #1 recommendation of the Education Select Committee, the Children's Commission and everything. It is the bill that means that schools and local authorities have to follow best practice. Too many areas aren't, and this is the bill that will do that. So I would just like to say a huge thank you, and let's all get this bill through now.
That the bill be now ready second time. As many of say aye.
Aye.
As we know. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Congratulations, Vicky Ford.